Welcome back to Get Down to Business, the show all about small business jobs and entrepreneurship. And joining us today is an entrepreneur who has lived the full arc of business success, from the early hustle to a massive global exit and the intentional reinvention that follows. Our guest is Erik Dodier, a lifelong entrepreneur and EOS implementer. We've talked about EOS many times in this program. Erik co-founded Pixel Media, just 24 years old, bootstrapping it from a small apartment into Rafter One, a leading global partner for Salesforce with a team of over 500 people, eventually leading to its acquisition by IPG in 2022. He stepped out of the CEO role and he shifted his focus towards playing the long game, prioritizing longevity, clarity, and intentional living. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. Erik, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks. Great to be here. Appreciate the introduction. Happy to be with you.
Yeah, Erik, you often talk about playing that long game. For a founder currently in this sprint of a startup, how would you define that philosophy, both for a business and for personal life?
Yeah, well, it's funny. You got to both pay attention to the immediate, especially when you're an entrepreneur, what's in front of you, kind of always hustling, but sort of thinking long-term as well. Not expecting, the overnight results, not expecting, immediate overnight success, and sort of just trusting that consistent pressure, persistence kind of pays off in the long run. When you're not getting what you want, you're getting experience at the very least. So that's the upside to the journey you're on as an entrepreneur.
So true. You led a company for nearly 30 years before a major exit. What did that journey teach you about maintaining calm and clarity in your decision making?
Yeah, I think it wasn't always calm and clarity in the earlier days. It was just sheer hustle, and then over time you just start to see situations kind of repeat themselves. Right? It's the same. You kind of sort of get this sense of pattern recognition. Okay, I've seen this before. Making this hiring decision, I rushed it the last time. Maybe I need to take my time a bit more this time. So I think I call it pattern recognition. You've sort of seen this collective set of circumstances before, so you just simply know how to react to it better, or maybe not react to it. And I just think that's that's the wisdom you gain with years and years of running a business that you just don't have out of the gate.
Mm-hmm. And what do founders most commonly get wrong when trying to build sustainable success? How can they start designing companies that serve their lives rather than consuming them?
Well, that's when you get into sort of the EOS part of my journey, which didn't come into my journey. You mentioned 30 years. So we didn't actually implement EOS until year 25. But to give you a sense of how it impacted our business, we had grown our business, Pixel Media, which I started in 1994, which is just a real sort of web design development company. There was and still is thousands of these. And we kept pivoting. But it was sort of managed chaos, and sort of in spite of ourselves, we grew it to about 75 people, about $15 million in revenue. But we were sort of stuck, right? We were always hitting that ceiling. And in 2019, after many pivots, we had started just narrowing down. A friend had posted on LinkedIn that he was going to start helping companies implement EOS. I reached out to him to ask him what it was all about, which if you've talked to folks, it stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. He came up, explained it to us, explained how he'd seen it work in companies he had worked for. And we rolled it out, and we grew our business 5x in the next 4 years. So went from 75 people to 500 and went from 15 million to 75 million. There was private equity in there. There was M&A in there. And then ultimately we sold the business in 2022. And I stepped away in 2024. But the power of focusing your business and spending and prioritizing what you're working on was so powerful. That's one of the things EOS helps companies do, and certainly helped us.
Yeah, and after the acquisition of Rafter One, you had to ask, what does good life look like from here? How did your definition of success evolve once the pressure of the exit was gone?
There was sort of this weight, I think, off my shoulders. I have a family that I was always certainly physically present for. I'm not sure I was mentally present. Your mind was always working out that next business problem or business issue. I can just be more present, just slow down a bit. Not running out the door to get to the office, not running to the next phone call, just a little more space in my day and schedule that honestly feels like a blessing, right? Because I know not everybody is afforded that opportunity, but something I think I grinded and put in the time for, in the 25, 30 years it took to get here. And it just looks like a much sort of freedom of time, freedom of my passions, freedom of purpose that I'm able to get now.
We've talked about EOS already, and you are a fantastic EOS implementer. So in that capacity, how do you help teams move past quarter by quarter thinking? What is the first step to making decisions with our future selves in mind?
Yeah, well, EOS is such a great operating system, and there's other things out there, but I just found this to sort of put all the pieces together. And when we start with a client, we start with just looking at the way the business is structured, getting the right people in the right roles and the right seats. We look at setting those first sets of priorities, what's most important to the business now. And it's funny, we then come back in a couple other days and we start to build the vision of the business. And because we've now taught them some tools of how they're going to gain traction and gain momentum. And we get a leadership team that's just working much better together, a more healthy team. And so we kind of coined that in the US. It's VTH, vision, traction, and healthy. When we get those things right, a lot of things start to click. And then that 90-day march is about addressing what's important the next 90 days towards that big vision that you've just built. And that's that combination of thinking long-term, but executing on the short term.
We've been chatting all about your journeys in life, your inspiration and mentorship to other small business owners. But I mentioned you have built a pretty fantastic team, and building a team of 500 people, it's a massive feat. Looking back, what's the most critical system you put in place that allowed the company to scale without losing its durability?
Yeah, well, one of the key I always had built the business the first 25 years, sort of one person at a time, right? We hired people, tried to find those right people, hoped, we were aligning people to our core values. We began the EOS model, and it really became about hiring in on those core values, getting the right people that already kind of believe in the similar things that you believe in as a business. The scaling of it came actually through some M&A. But the same thing applied. You had to find organizations that were led by people that shared core values similar to yours. And I was very fortunate to be involved in the process of sort of vetting out the companies, spoke with the founders, and they were founder-led companies just like us. Each of us, when we joined, had about 100 to 150 people. And so when we put it together, we're at about 400 and continued to grow. But those founders had built organizations with similar core values.
Yeah, Erik, what are the 3 daily habits you rely on to stay focused on long-term energy and performance? How do you protect that time amidst the demands of leadership?
Yeah, now, I have a few buckets of things I kind of try to put my time into, and, EOS mastery is one. I love to just continue to learn how I can do better and better as an EOS implementer, but health is another, and all the things you see now, trying to just exercise 3 to 5 days a week, eat much more healthy, get better sleep. It's sort of the basics. And, with all the technology and little wearables, you can almost track, keep a scorecard of how you're doing with your health. And I can see the things that kind of knock me off or take my energy away, and see the things that give me energy. And I continually just try to add in the things that give me energy and remove the things that don't.
Erik, for the entrepreneur listening who's currently eyeing an exit, what's the most important thing that they should be doing now to prepare for their personal redefinition once the deal is closed?
Well, one, keep your eye on that exit, because there's a lot of twists and turns in that process. And again, enjoy the process. If you feel like you're getting close and you can kind of see a finish line, start to realize that you're going to be removing a big part of your life, right? My business was kind of like my baby. I'd grown it for 25 years. It was kind of everything. It was my identity. It was sort of my personality. It was how I was known in the community, was the owner of Pixel Media. And so, you got to start to think about, I started reading books on how to retire, how to, build new habits into your life. I'm married. I got a couple teenagers. So how could I feed that in? But my goal was to start to think about how I could chunk out my time so that I still felt fulfilled. And EOS had always been on my mind, and it kind of fills that business void almost perfectly for me, and lets me still work with some clients, but yet I control my schedule, I control the pace. So it's a great mix. But just get in control of where you want to be spending that large block of time that's going to be available to you.
Erik, really enjoyed our conversation. You've given some really practical advice, which is so relevant at this time of year. Erik, I want to give the final word over to you. How can we get in touch with you? How can we learn more about the work that you're doing and keep the conversation going?
Yeah, no, I love it. Best way. So I love LinkedIn. I feel like LinkedIn is such a great tool because as soon as people reach out, if they're reaching out to me, I'm just Erik Dodier on LinkedIn. Pixel Media is kind of where you can find me. And then also under the EOS site, if you go to the EOS implementer site, you can search for implementers. Again, Erik, Erik, Dodier. And love talking to people about EOS. If people just have questions about it. Again, I work with mostly clients up here in the Northeast. But if people want to get familiar with EOS, I'm happy to talk to them, and we can all find someone in their local area that can help them out.
Awesome, Erik. Thank you so much for joining us. That's a wrap for us this week on Get Down to Business, the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. As always, all of our shows, 12 plus years of shows, available on our website, shalomklein.com. And I respond to every message to get in touch. To success, let's get down to business.